Greetings, everybody. Welcome back. This is episode number 7 of this course where we are talking about writing unit tests and integration tests in React applications. In episode number 6, we implemented some features. So we wrote some production code, and I told you that after implementing these new features, we are going to test them. And this is the episode where we are going to make that happen. So in this episode, we are going to write new tests for employee form. So employee form now has two, new features: updating an employee and canceling an update when you are in the middle of updating an employee. So if, for example, I show you the employee form that we talked about in the previous episode, you now see that we have this button, these two buttons, right? So one of them is for updating a new employee and canceling the update while we're in the middle of that, update. So now we want to write tests for these, new features. So if I take you to, let's say, here, if you take a look, we have our test for employee list, but we do not have any tests for employee form. This is something that we are going to create, by the way, right now. So I'm going to have this employee form.test.tsx. And this is the code that we are going to write. Let's check out the code. So we're creating a new employee. We are mocking these two functions on add and on cancel. These are the two, props that the component employee form, if I'm not mistaken, expects. So on add and on cancel. So these are the two props that the component expects to receive. We are going to mock these. We are going to mock these two dependencies, and we are going to clear the mocks, reset the mocks before each test. And we have this employee here. And then this is the first test we are going to write. This is the first test. Take a look at the name. It says renders form with empty field when not editing. So when we render the employee add with that mock, right, what we expect is to see this. So for name, role, and department, we do not expect to see any value inside of the inputs. The next thing is that when we are in the middle of editing an employee, we expect the name of that employee to be inside of that input field. So given we have this, component, employee form, with these props, editing employee on add and on cancel. By the way, if you take a look at this editing employee, this is the same employee object we created here. So we're passing this object as the employee that is being edited right now, right here. And we are passing those two, mocked version of the on add and on cancel callbacks. So when we have an editing employee ready, and that employee that is being edited has, for example, the first name as Alice, we need to see this on the screen. So we need to have an input with this placeholder and with this value. We also expect to see this button, update employee, and we also expect to see this button, because if you take a look at our component, employee form, it says here, right, whenever editing employee has some value, show update employee. Whenever editing employee has some value, render the cancel button. We are verifying this here. We're verifying, given an editing employee, we expect to see this text, and we expect to see this text, which is, the button. So the next test, it says calls on add with updated employee on submit. So given this component with the mocked version of the add callback, if we, put this Alice updated inside of that input with this placeholder, so we're basically putting a new name for that employee, right? We are basically firing an event, a change event for this element, we're querying the element using a screen.get by placeholder text, and then the placeholder that we want to check is name, and then what we need to set to that element is target value and then Alice updated. So the value of the target, which is going to be an element with this placeholder, is going to be Alice updated. This kind of simulates entering a new name for that employee that we are in the middle of editing, this employee, the object that we created above, right? And then we, kind of simulate clicking on the update employee button. So we are, clicking the, let's say, a button which has this text. We are simulating clicking that button, and then this is what we expect. So we expect the mocked version of that add button, of that add function, to have been called with this object. So an employee object with this new name. We could also write another code, another expect. For example, we expect that this mocked version of this unadd has been called once, for example, for this employee. But here we are expecting that that function has been called exactly with this, let's say object. So these are the three tests for the new features that we implemented in the previous episode. I'm going to take you to VS Code. I have this employee form test, and I'm going to write the code here, the code that we just discussed. Let's import the employee form component. This is basically the first set of tests that we are writing for this component. Let's create our describe block. Let's create the employee, which will be the editing employee, the employee that we are in the middle of editing. And then let's mark these two callbacks on add and on cancel. Before each test, we're going to reset these marks. And then let's write the first test. The first test expects to not render, expects the component to render nothing when it is being shown for the first time. The second test expects the component to actually populate the information about the employee that we are editing inside of the input fields that it has. So the name would have the name Alice, and we expect those two buttons to be available, update employee and cancel. And then the third test expects that when we actually update an employee, that button has been called with that specific employee object. So we set a new name for that employee, and then we expect this unadd mark to have been called with this specific object here. Take a look at the name. The name is Alice updated. The third test is for canceling. So we basically expect the uncancel mark to get invoked whenever we click that button. So we're simulating the click on the cancel button, and we expect the uncancel mark to be called once. This is exactly the same thing that we did for the update. Now let's get to the notes and continue. So this is the test for employee form. We didn't talk about the cancel yet. This is the cancel. Now we want to write integration test for editing and deleting in the app.tsx. So we need to change this, right? We need to change the app.tsx in order to be able to edit or delete an employee. Let me take you to app.tsx one more time. This is what we did in the previous episode, right? So right now, if you take a look, we have this function here, handle edit, and we have handle delete, handle edit, handle add, and handle update. And then we are invoking the components. We're passing in the props. Now, what we want to do is to write code for add, edit, and delete employees flow. If you check out this file, right now, we only have one single test. So the test that we have, expect to, see these, let's say, different employees, and then it expects to, it expects the add behavior to work correctly. When you add a new employee, Charlie manager sales, it expects this piece of text to be inside of the document. So we have the kind of add functionality tested already. But we're going to make changes. So take a look at the code here. I'm going to walk you through the code real quick because we have already talked about these. So first off, we expect these two employees to be inside of the document. Why? Because if I take you to app.tsx, you see that we already have these two. So first off, we expect these two to be available. Then we are simulating adding a new employee. So name, role, and department, right? Clicking the add employee. And then we are expecting the new employee to be inside of the document. And then we are going to edit the employee. If you take a look, we are going to edit the employee, the third employee that we just added. And then we expect the name input to have the word Charlie. And then we are going to change the name of Charlie, update the name to Charlie updated. We are going to click on the update button. And then we expect to see this Charlie updated with the role inside of parentheses to be in the document. And then we are going to delete the employee, right? So the third employee, deleting Charlie, the employee that we just added. And we expect to have Charlie updated manager to be null, right? So we are basically testing the flow of adding a new employee, updating that employee, and finally deleting that employee. Right now, what we have is only adding a new employee. There is no test for updating and deleting. I'm going to get rid of this, and I am going to write the test for those two operations as well. So deleting and updating. We're importing, and then we are creating a test. We are rendering the app component. We are first checking to see whether we see those two components, those two employees in there. Then we are going to test the flow of adding a new employee. The name, the role, and the department of that employee. And then clicking that button. And we check that Charlie with the role of manager to be present in the document. Then we are going to edit the third employee. So actually, calling the edit button, the third edit button, clicking that third edit button, we expect the names to show in the input, for example, Charlie, and then we make an update to the name. We pass the value Charlie updated, and we click on that update employee. and we expect to see Charlie updated manager in the document. Deleting, we're going to click the third delete button, and we expect to not see Charlie updated manager in the document. So this is the code for the deleting, updating, and adding a new employee. Now let me run the tests. So we have a failing test here inside of the employee form TSX. Let me take a look here. Employee form. I think I need to correct this. So this is going to be from employee. Let me run the test one more time. Now we have 7 tests that are all passing, and we have 4 test files. So these are the 3 test files for the components, and we have 1 test file for the utility function. So I'm going to wrap up this video here, and I'm going to continue talking about this application in the next video. And if you enjoyed watching it as before, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next episode.